Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Retro Wrestling Room. We have a very special guest with us on the show today. We have one of the stalwarts of the Attitude Era. And he's actually a former WWF Tag Team Champion with the team, the Headbangers. We have Chaz Warrington on the show here today, formerly known or also known as Mosh, because as you'll find out today, they are actually still going today on the US Indies. We have Mosh on the show. How's it going, my man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you? Happy to
Yeah,
be here.
really good. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show. I'll get it out the way early. A very big fan. I was massively into WWF during that Attitude Era and playing the games with the figures. Yeah, so a massive fan. So I'm so glad that you are on the show here today.
Awesome. Happy to be here. And the best part is you can still play with us on the video games and the new figures. So that's a positive there.
Exactly.
All these years later, we're almost relevant again. So it's pretty awesome. It's pretty
Uh,
awesome.
I've got to point out because in the picture, just over your left shoulder, I noticed there are two very special figures there, and I believe they are
Right
the
here?
just above. I believe. Oh no, they are the new figures, but
Yes,
just
these are the new ones from Mattel.
they are the brand new brilliant ones in that what they
Yes.
actually called an elite collection. Sorry.
Yes.
But there's a very special story about some of the figures that are in that frame just above your head there.
That one?
Yes, that you brought up on the Matt Cardona podcast a few years ago. And these are the actual prototypes of figures that weren't released. They were going to be released back in, I guess it was the late 90s, early 2000s, right?
It was probably more mid
Hmm.
2000s, I think, because it was right before right before WWE went away from Jax and signed with Mattel, or
Right.
Hasbro, whoever they went with after Jax. So the story there is those were the classic editions that were supposed to come out, and right as our figures were the next one to come out is when the agreement ended with Jax and WWE, and Vince went a different route with a different company. So they were never actually made into production. The story is my son played soccer his entire life, and at this point he was probably four or five. Yeah, he was 4 or 5. So this had to be 2008-ish, 2009 when this happened.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, because he was playing soccer. So yeah, so a friend of his that was on the team, his parents were toy makers, distributors, and toy inventors. They had ties to My Little Pony, Cabbage Patch Kids, and Britney Spears. So they knew. I told them the story of this, and I was coaching Tyler's soccer team back then, and kind of, at the end of the year, they gave me a gift. So she knew the president of Jax. So she went to Jax, told him the story. Those are the clay prototypes of those classic edition figures that were supposed to come out that never came out. So yeah, so those are and when I told Matt the story, it's funny, when I told Matt the story, he was like, "Oh, that's bullshit." He goes, "It's just custom made ones that someone made." So I showed them on their podcast live. Him and Brian freaked out, and then we actually did a show together. And I took them with me to show, and like Matt was like freaking out about them. But yeah, those are the only ones in the world. Um,
Wow.
yeah, the clay prototypes, so they're pretty awesome.
That is pretty special. And like you said, like with the elite figures as well now, there's also the Hasbro style figures from FC Toys that they've released as well. What's it
Uh,
like that like now in 2025 that they're still releasing Headbangers merch, Headbangers figures?
it's I mean, it's really cool. Like it's like you said, it's all these years later to be able to have, a figure out of you again, especially after, not having any for so long. And to make it even better, it was actually Mattel who contacted WWE and said, "Hey, we haven't made figures of the Headbangers in we've never made them. They haven't had new figures in years. We want to make them, so put them under the nostalgia contract," which is how it happened. So to have the actual toy company go to WWE and say, "Hey, this is what we want to do,"
Mm.
And then from there, then we're on, WWE 2K24, 2K25. And then last year they flew us out to California, out to San Francisco for the video game where they put all the dots on it. So all of our ring entrances and moves and double team stuff is all actually us doing them in the ring. And it's funny when I play with myself on the game, um, I sit there and I can see the little nuances, the little things that Glenn and I do that no one else would have if they had, because what they do is they had extras there. They had indie guys there trying to mimic moves and people's entrances. But no one would ever been able to pull off like the drop down clothesline, the double flapjack,
Exactly.
the powerbomb leg drop, the stage dive. No one would have been able to pull it off like we do it.
Yeah, there's some of those things that is really unique, isn't it? Like even just like little head turns or something, after the move or where you move your arms, like it's very specific things. But
Yeah, it's very specific. And for me, where I first noticed it is when I get in the ring, I kind of dive roll through the middle, through the bottom and the middle rope. And then I go to the far corner. And when I jump down, I guess I realize it when I do it, but I don't. But then when I saw it on the video game, I was like, oh, I do that little hop. Like I can tell I do that little hop to catch my balance. And that's actually in the game. And I was like, oh, that's one of those little details that
yeah,
probably wouldn't have been in there. And no one else probably notices it but me. But
but yeah.
I think it's really cool.
Going way back to when you were a kid, were you a big fan of wrestling growing up? Because I know you trained like amateur wrestling in school and things like that. But were you a big fan of pro wrestling at that time?
Yeah, I was a fan. I guess I turned into a bigger fan as I went on, and then I kind of got away from it for a little bit. But yeah, probably mid '80s is when I really started watching.
Mm.
When WrestleMania started, I actually was going through pictures and it's me opening up at Christmas. I think I was like 13 or 14 of like the old LJN figures of Hulk Hogan. And I don't remember who the other one was, but I was holding it up like I was all excited and I sent them the picture of it. So yeah, so I was a pretty big fan then. I'd go over to the Spectrum in Philly with a buddy of mine. We'd go over every month, take the speed line over and watch. And then, we'd go to Garden State Racetrack when the first few WrestleManias came out, they did closed circuit TV.
Mm.
Yeah, and everyone at that age has that Hulk Hogan poster on the back of their door. So
Yeah.
had to be on the back of the door because you don't want anybody to really see it.
So when did you go from being just a fan to actually start training? Because in your timeline, I think it was like mid 20, no, 23, what am I talking about? Mid 93, something like that, you started training, is that right?
Yeah, so there was a it was called the Route 30 Flea Market. That was like 15 minutes from where I lived in South Jersey, and I would drive by and this is one of those buildings where it's like you don't want to judge the book by its cover, but you would drive by. I'm like, I'm not going in there. It's one of those. It's probably one of those shops that have like used underwear and used T-shirts and
All right.
and just garbage that you wouldn't normally use, people's leftovers. But one night they would. One night there was a truck out front and there was a big giant, almost like a U-Haul, and spray painted on the side of it said "Pro Wrestling Saturday Night." So I was like, oh, cool. I mean, I have nothing going on Saturday. Let me go in there and check this out. And the only wrestling I knew of then was WWE and WCW. I didn't know what indie wrestling was. I had no idea what I was walking into. But I went in and that was the Monster Factory. Larry's promotion back then was World Wrestling Alliance. It was WWA. And yeah, so I went in and I went and watched and hung out. And then after the show, I'm talking to this guy who kind of looked familiar to me, but he wrestled as the Spider. He had a mask on, so when he was wrestling, and then afterwards, I started talking to him, and it turned out to be Glenn, who is now he trained me. He was a trainer at the school and my partner. And yeah, so we started talking, and from there, so I just kind of fell into it.
We When I was doing some of the research for this podcast, it surprised me that you started around mid 93 doing the training, because some people may not know, because they know about the Headbangers when you came in around 97-ish. And
Right.
it became huge then. But you actually had some matches on Superstars when you were really young. We got some of the footage here. There's the Quebecers there, Papa Shango, I think Adam Bomb turns up. Um, so you couldn't have been wrestling very long at all when you started these matches.
No, it's funny because Papa Shango match that punch right there left knuckle marks on my forehead. But no, so I was only training 3 weeks when I had the first match with Adam Bomb. They were there. There was that match right there. When they came into town, they doing the superstars and stuff.
Mm.
When they came into town, they'd call Larry up and they would use Larry's guy. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and watch at the same time.
Yeah, that's okay.
Uh, so so yeah, so they came in and I literally was training 3 weeks. And Glenn said to me, "Hey, WWF's coming into town. They're going to do TV tapings, and he uses Larry's guys. We're going to go." And I said to him, I said, "I'm been here 3 weeks. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm not ready to do that." And he said to me, "Hey," he goes, "they're not going to use you because they've never seen you before." He goes, "Well, you'll go. They'll see you. You're going to get paid." So I was like, "All right, cool." So Tony Garea, they used to have a big whiteboard. Tony Greer rolls the whiteboard out, and there it was: Adam Bomb versus Chaz Ware. Because they cut my name down. They said Warrington was too long for TV. And I was like, "Oh shit." I'm like, I looked at Glenn. I said, "Thought they weren't going to use me." He goes, "Well," he goes, "they are now." He goes, "So here we go." And so that first night was Adam Bomb. That was 3 weeks in. And then my second night was Papa Shango. And yeah, and then my very first match, that's actually coming up. So July 7th is the 32nd anniversary of me having that first match against Adam Bomb. And so he was my very first match. And then my very first the way TV's worked out
Mm.
is my match with Papa Shango actually aired before the Adam Bomb match.
Right.
So and that was so I started in June of 93. That was the beginning of July of 93. I went up one more time. I actually had four TV matches before I had like my first real match down at Larry's school,
Like,
which was amazing.
yeah, it's crazy to think about because I mean, you wouldn't see that now, I don't think.
No,
You hear stories about, Matt and Jeff, they were coming in when they were, well, I don't think Jeff was quite of age, but he
no,
managed to,
Jeff definitely lied about his age.
yeah.
We actually worked Matt and Jeff as enhanced. They were enhancement guys for us when
Mm.
we were in Smoky Mountain. So even before we got
Wow.
to WWE, we had worked Matt and Jeff down in Smoky Mountain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy that, even things like that, you just don't realize how people have crossed paths before us fans kind of see it on TV, and things like that. But you mentioned,
So
oh, go on.
the crossing paths thing is actually really cool because, you know, growing up watching, I watched Demolition, watched Powers of Pain, you watched Ricky and Robert, the Rock and Roll Express.
Mm.
And then not that we ever wrestled Demolition, but we've been in the ring with the Powers of Pain. Obviously, we've been in the ring multiple times with the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky and Robert. But and then we've all become friends. So to go from
Yeah.
I have a picture of meeting Ricky Morton at President's Hall in Disney World in Orlando from when I was in 10th grade in high school.
Oh, wow.
I actually took that back later when we were smoking Mountain. I had him sign it for me. But to be able to be a fan and then friends with them, like we're friends with, like I chat with Demolition off and on. Like they seek us out at conventions, and the Powers of Pain do. Like when we're all together, it's just so surreal to be a fan and then being able to work with them at some point, and now just being friends with everybody, and how it all circles around. It's just really cool. And then like when I wrestled Papa Shango, there's a story behind there where he asked me how to throw a punch. And at this point, down at the school, I didn't know how to throw a punch. I'd never thrown a punch. I just knew how to take bumps barely and hit the ropes. And I said to him, I said, "Well, I hit you like right around there, like in your neck area." And he said, like, All right. So long story short, he wanted to see how I threw a punch. So he said to me, he goes, punch me. I went, right now? Because we were in the locker room. He's like, yeah, I want to see how you throw a punch. I was like, okay. I punched him. I punched him so hard in the jaw. He stood there like this, holding his mouth. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm dead. He's gonna
Yeah.
kill me. I was like, oh my God, what do I do? He looked at me, he goes, kid, tonight you're gonna throw kicks. And he made me, I had like 3 kicks, but all the time we were in WWE together, I never told him that story. For some odd reason, I just never, I don't know, it just never came up. I never shared it. But years later, we were in California doing WrestleCon, and he had his the Papa Shango gimmick on. I went over and I said to him, I said, never told you this. I go, you were my second match I ever had. And he was like, really? So I start telling him the story about the punch, and he stops me and he goes, you're the kid that almost knocked my teeth out in the locker room. I'm like, yeah, that was me. He goes, I tell everybody that story. He goes, I had no idea that was you. But to go back and now share that with him, it just makes it even more special.
It is amazing things like that. We when you started training with Glenn, I don't know if there was any kind of inkling that you were going to be a tag team straight off, because he already had the Spider character, right?
Right. Yeah,
So,
so he had been around for about 2, almost 3 years before I went down to the school. He had been to Japan already, he had been to Puerto Rico, and he was kind of known in the Northeast area.
so you started, teaming obviously as the Spiders, and you made quite a name for yourself in USWA, down in Lawless. There's the silly string that we shooting out at the crowd before the matches
Yep.
even started. Um, what was it like this kind of tag team? Because I guess you were wrestling almost with your trainer, so we could kind of walk you through the matches as well at that time. I guess if it was that early
Yeah,
on.
it was I mean, it wasn't at first, because Glenn actually had hurt his back, and was gone from the school for probably a good month.
Mm,
Um, and then when he came back, and I had a couple matches under my belt, it's actually funny. It was September of '93 when I had my first real match. Glenn was the heavyweight champ at the time. They had me go out. I put the spider mask on because he couldn't work because his back was hurt. So I went out with the mask on. I had his jacket on. I did the silly string thing just as the spider, and went out. And the boy gone bad, who was the big heel at the time for Larry, came in from behind, hit me with a chair, hit me with a DDT, and pinned me 1, 2, 3, and I lost Glenn's belt for him. So that was all like in my like first night, and then I had a couple. It was a couple months later when Glenn came back, and he said to me, "Hey, Glenn and I we clicked right off the bat. We got along really well, and we became friends very quickly." And he said to me, he goes, I've always wanted to, you know, do more in this business. He goes, I really haven't gotten anywhere as myself. He goes, we get along so well. I already have, like, he had doors open. Like, he had known Lawler, and he knew Cornette from them coming up to Larry to do Larry shows and doing independents and things like that. So he kind of had connections. And I was like, at that point, I was still trying to figure out who I was. I had no idea what I was going to do. So I was like, sure, why not? Let's try it. Glenn's the trainer, and everyone. Glenn had this magnetic personality. Like, everyone wanted to be around Glenn. Everybody wanted to be him. And 'cause he ran the school, and like I said, he was the trainer, he was the head guy. And when he presented that opportunity to me at first, I was like, well, I'm not sure. And then I was just like, what are you doing? Like, this is Glenn. Like, he's already got connections, and we'll see what happens. And so that we had our first, I want to say we had our first tag match together, like in front of a crowd, probably December of '94. And then we did a couple of other indie shows. And then by April of '94, we packed up the car and we went to Memphis. We had no idea how long we were going to be there. We had no idea where we were going to stay. Like, we had to go find an apartment, the whole thing. But it was all, for me, for my career, the way kind of everything happened, it was kind of just meant to be, because every step was, step up going forward. And for me, just at that point, everything was just kind of meant to be how it happened.
And it's kind of cool because, like, even like on your shirt now, and obviously the tattoo as well, the spider tattoo. You managed to kind of take kind of that element of your career into the designs and stuff, even when you were past that kind of spider gimmick. And because when you were brought into Smoky Mountain by Jim Cornette, he didn't want you to be the spiders anymore. He wanted this new tag team that he'd kind of dreamt up after going to a Danzig concert, which is very odd picture to think of Jim Cornette in a
We had at a
Danzig
Danzig
gig.
concert.
But
I know.
yeah, I can't quite see that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how we managed to get in there. But what was it like, kind of changing the gimmick at that time? Because you'd obviously kind of formed this character and kind of built this gimmick up by this point. He was obviously starting to get over in USWA and things. To kind of be brought in and then almost kind of start again with this brand new gimmick. What was the kind of feelings between you and Glenn at that time?
Glenn was a little more unsure and apprehensive about it than I was.
Mm,
Because he obviously was doing the spider thing a lot longer.
mm,
We talked to Larry Sharp about it, and we always went back to Larry with everything. And Larry was like, "Oh, you put so much time and effort into this. Like, you should see it. Finish seeing it out. Finish it out and see where it goes." But at that point, we were kind of stuck. We did our thing in USWA. Then we were in at that point, before Smoky Mountain, we were in Ozark Mountain Wrestling for Burt
mm,
Prentice, and there was really nowhere to go. The next place for us to go was, because USWA kind of ended a little sourly at that point because they wanted us to take the masks off, which we did. But then when we did, we went blackface underneath and painted a white spider on our face. And, he had or not Cornette. Waller didn't like that at all. So anyway, we were like, what do we do? We wanted to go to Smoky Mountain. Smoky Mountain, we knew was another gateway into WWF. So Cornette presented this to us, and we were like, well, let's just try it. If it doesn't work, we can always go back to being spiders again. Like, it's not a big deal.
mm.
So yeah, so that's how it happened. It kind of I was all on board with it. I was like, this is great because I've been to mosh pits, I've been to heavy metal concerts, I've slam danced, I've been in the mosh pit, so I knew what it was like. Glenn, not so much, but I kind of knew the culture and kind of knew what we had to do and things like that. And it made it for me was kind of easy. And then the other good part about it was the characters, the way they were. Because for me, the great part about the mask was I laughed all the time. I was constantly laughing and smiling in the ring
Right.
because I was just every time I walked the ring, I was like, "Holy cow! I can't believe I'm doing this! Like, this is crazy that I'm actually, doing this." I'd say making money, but at that point, I wasn't making money. But the gimmick for the headbangers, like when I come out through the curtain and I'm laughing, like that's just not part of the gimmick. That's actually me because I'm still so excited. Even to this day, when I go to the ring, I pause and I look around and I still go, "Holy cow! This is crazy that I'm not only doing this, but still doing this, so many years later." But the gimmick kind of just we kind of Cornette gave us, a couple of ideas and we ran with it and we ran hard and fast and had fun with it. And still having fun with it.
Yeah. What was it like working with Jim Cornette?
Amazing.
Mm,
The it's the difference between Smoky Mountain Wrestling and USWA was night and day.
mm,
Uh USWA was great because it gave us an opportunity. Learned a lot from it, but at the same time, it was kind of a negative atmosphere. Smoky Mountain was one of the most positive places, one of the most positive territories I've ever been in. It, the day we walked in, all everybody wanted to do was help us. That's
mm.
all they wanted to do. Everyone just wanted to help. Everyone wanted to be better. And then we're working with Tracy Smothers and
Yeah.
Dirty White Boy. We're working with them. We're working with Ricky and Robert. We're at Brad Armstrong. Tommy Rich. Everyone in there, Buddy Landell. They all wanted to help, and it was just an amazing, amazing experience. And then Cornette just is brilliant. He just got a brilliant mind for the business, and to be able to to learn from him was ridiculous.
The one thing I don't know if it's been brought up to you before, but the one special thing about, well, you and Glenn really, is that it's almost like a polar opposite, but you can both claim to be Jim Cornette guys and Vince Russo guys.
Yeah,
there's, there's not many
funny.
there's not many people I think that could be the two, but you definitely managed that. When you got brought into obviously WWF, on Shotgun Saturday Night. It was almost like this weird kind of gimmick. Again, was well, I think you had actually debuted as the Headbangers, which was even stranger the timeline. But it was this kind of weird new characters again, that kind of go by two different names, the Sisters of Love and the Flying Nuns. What was it like? What was this character like for you? Because, like, again, this is obviously just you and Glenn again, but completely different characters again.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it was funny. We did a couple of TV matches when we first signed our first
Mm.
contract. Because our first contract we signed in November of '96, and it was part time. So we did a few matches in November, December, and then they created Shotgun Saturday Night on. It was live, and Saturday nights going to be in different nightclubs in New York. And being fortunate enough that we live 2 hours away, they flew us up, or not flew us up. We could drive up and do the shows. The good part was they didn't have to fly us. Um, and we were at TV, and all of a sudden we got this note that we had to go to get fitted for new outfits. And we're like, new outfits? What's wrong with the outfits we have? Like, we go to the thrift store. Like, you're going to try and change our look. And Bruce Pritchard was like, don't worry about it. He goes, I'll be there. I'll see you guys tomorrow. So he met us there, and they started fitting us with all this stuff. And that's what we said. We were like, what's going on? Um, the short story is Vince McMahon had this idea that we were going to be so crazy and so out there that we didn't care what we wore, what we did. You never knew what we were going to show up in, which is why sometimes our outfits got crazier than other times with with the different types, the fishnets, and
Mhm.
we'd wear black wedding gowns. Like, it was just going to be crazy that we just didn't care. We were just there to have a good time. So that's what the Flying Nuns were supposed to be. They were supposed to be that because they had us as the Flying Nuns one week. Then the following week, we were Headbangers. Then the following week, the Flying Nuns were getting arrested by staring at little kids in a Disney store. So it was just that's the thing that Vince McMahon had in mind for us, was
Mhm.
we were just going to be so, we didn't care, just batshit crazy, that we were just going to wear and do whatever we wanted and not care what anyone thought. Which is the funny part about that is that's kind of very slowly, and wasn't even by design, of where the gimmick evolved to, of us saying, people would say, why do you wear skirts? Why do you wear earrings? Why do you have piercings? And our answer always was, because we can. We're not hurting anyone. So what do you care what we wear? Be your own person, do your own thing. But that's where it evolved into. And it really made an impact on people, that whole saying of, because we can, just do what you want to do as long as you're your own person and you're not hurting anyone. Who cares?
Well, once you finally got settled kind of on the roster, then you know, even now, like we mentioned earlier, you still like were the most recognizable teams of that time, I guess. And you even, well, you hit the ground running first of all, and then you even won the tag team titles within the first year of being on that roster. What was that moment like? So it was in your house, Ground Zero, when you finally won those titles. What was it like winning those titles? Because obviously, being a fan at that stage, particularly, we'd had the big boom of the 80s with the teams like the Heart Foundation, Bulldogs, Demolition, and then, later on, Nasty Boys, LOD, to be finally win those titles. What was that feeling like?
Um, it's still to this day kind of hard to explain. It's not a Super Bowl, it's not a World Series. It's kind of something, that's kind of given to you. It's
Hmm.
earned, but it's still given to you. But it's the idea of Vince looking at us, even though it was only a month or whatever it was. to look at us and go, hey, I appreciate what you guys did, what you guys have done. You've only been here a short time. We appreciate it. Here you go. It's just it's surreal. And then the other great part is we got to share it with Cornette because Cornette's the one who actually told us, that we were going to win the belts that night. And there was a lot of things that had to come into play for that. Like Stone Cold got hurt. If Steve never got hurt, then we're probably not in that spot because that's when Steve and Mankind or Dude Love
Mm.
were tag champs. If they didn't get hurt, we're probably not in that spot. Um, so it's really hard to put it into words, but it's beyond special. It kind of puts us in that, like you said, that category of, we live forever with that. No one can ever take that away. And I kind of feel the same way about the NWA tag titles when we won those. Even though we were with WWF at the time, that's still one of the most prestigious tag team titles out there. Um, so it's just beyond special, and it's really to this day hard to put into words exactly what it meant and what it means. And I literally have the belt hanging right there on the wall, and like I look at it every day, and I still just look at it like just an amazement that it's there that I had that opportunity.
Obviously, being from the UK, I have to bring up the two appearances that you made in the UK, the Capital Carnage show and the One Night Only show. The One Night Only show as well. I think being particularly special because of the just instant reaction you got within that match as well. You're massive fan favorites here in the UK. What was that experience like coming to the UK to wrestle?
That was awesome. That was such a Glenn and I on my podcast, that I do live on every Monday night on Facebook and Instagram. We just spoke about that the other day as one of the because people always ask us like, what are your favorite matches? And it's
Yeah.
it's typical. Like favorite matches are Ground Zero winning the belts, WrestleMania 13, things like that. But what Glenn and I spoke about on this past week was basically matches outside of those. And one of the ones we brought up was One Night Only, because coming out, that was our first time in England, and coming out and getting the reaction and the pop we got was just it was crazy. You walk out and like the whole place erupted, and like you're covered in goose. Like I walk to the ring most of the time with goosebumps. Like you're covered in goosebumps walking down. And then we had a great match with the Bariquas. I think we went a good probably 15 to 20 minutes. There was
Mm.
like double heat in it, and it was just a really really good match. And the reaction was crazy awesome. And then Capital Carnage was the same thing. 'Cause that's when we worked LOD, but that's when Draws was there,
Mm.
in LOD. But the reaction that we got when we went over there was just huge, appreciated, and just meant a lot.
One of the things that often gets brought up when we talk about Mosh, especially, but kind of both of you as well, was the video games, those 90s video games on the PS1, the Warzone and Attitude. Um, I mean, in Warzone, it was those FMV videos for the
Right.
grudge matches that popped up, those infamous promos, the ones where people are still trying to decipher what Ahmed Johnson was saying. I don't think
Yes.
anybody ever got to the bottom of what he actually said. But your ones particularly were standout ones. Then that attitude game as well, when you were just throwing out these one-liners. What was it like, kind of like recording those for that game? I mean, I guess you couldn't know 20 odd years from now they'd still be infamous and still pop up on all these different websites on social media.
No, we just had fun with it. Like everything we did and everything we still do now, we just want to have fun with it. And when we were doing those videos, it was let's be ourselves, let's be different. Because we'll be in the middle of a match and somebody's getting hit on me, and I'll get kicked in the ribs. I'll be like, there's my fallopian tubes, and oh damn, my ovaries. Just for that reason right there, just to get a laugh and get a
Yeah.
reaction. So in the video game, we did a couple of them, and the video guys kind of looked at us. They were like, "What?" I'm like, this is us. This is what we do. We just want to have fun with it. So let us use our silly little lines instead, because everyone else was using the typical "ooh, ow," ooh, all the typical stuff.
Yeah.
Let us be us. Let us be different, and just have fun with it. And it's just great because we go back because I still have those systems, and actually, I enjoy playing those better than 2K24 and 25 because it's just
Yeah.
easier. There's not as many buttons to push. Um, I've actually on 2K24 had to wrestle myself just so I could see my own victory because I think I won one match so far. And all the times playing it. But
Yep.
yeah, it was all fun, it was all surreal, and it was all just like I said, fun. We just wanted to make the most out of it. And just because our thought it always was and still is, if we're having fun and we're laughing and having a good time, then everyone else in my mind, everyone else is. Maybe not everyone is, but in my mind, they're all because if you're not having fun, then why bother doing it? Like you should like if we're at a wrestling show, you're not having a good time, maybe you shouldn't be there because that's what it's about.
In between those, the main two Headbangers runs, you had the solo career as well, as the Chaz character, and also a very short-lived the Beaver Cleavage character. Um, what was it kind of like going from the Headbangers to this, again, having to reinvent yourself, kind of brand new characters? And I mean, those two were very different as well. The Beaver Cleavage one, and then just Chaz as well. So different. What was it like kind of trying to reinvent yourself as well as being a singles competitor?
Well, the beaver cleavage thing would have been was easier than trying to be Chaz. And the reason for that is was there was a character. I knew how to act. I knew what they wanted out of it. When they killed that off and I said, okay, you're going to go be Chaz, be this kid from New Jersey that's just happy to be here. I was like, okay, I don't know who that kid is. And at that point, Mariana, who was supposed to be my mother, now all of a sudden they transition her into, oh, say she's your girlfriend. I didn't know her. Like when she was my mother, I knew how to act. Her as my girlfriend and our personalities kind of clash. So that made it a little bit more difficult for me to figure out how to use her. Um, but it was for me, it was tough to become Chaz because I was like, who is Chaz? I didn't know who Chaz was. Like Chaz, when I very first started wrestling, was this kid down at the Monster Factory who was trying to figure out who he was. But now all of a sudden I went from Chaz to being a spider. That was easy. Headbanger, I knew who that was because that was just easy and fun. Beaver cleavage, that was fun and easy. My head was buried in boobs every night. Like who couldn't be thrilled to do that? But then it was like, go be Chaz. And as Chaz is a singles wrestler, like now I have to figure out, like I had a couple, with a tag match, I would do a couple of moves and then tag Glenn in. Then I could think about what I wanted to do. And then Glenn would tag me in. We do a double team. I do something to tag him out. But as a singles wrestler, now I had to create a whole new thing. It was very difficult for me because as silly as this may sound, for the most part, I'm an introvert. I'm very quiet. I'm very laid back, and I can be very shy. And if I'm in a situation where I'm uncomfortable, then I'm going to hide in a corner. And then when they said go out and be Chaz, I had no idea who I was, or what to do. And that's what I did. I like hid. And when I had to wrestle certain people and I had to get in the ring, if I wasn't comfortable with them, I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do? And it was very difficult for me. And then Glenn came back and I was like, okay, great. I can be a headbanger again. Um, the only thing I wish I would have realized, I write about this in my book, is when I had Mariana with me, I wish I would have I didn't look at the business as a business. I looked at it whereas I have a job. I'm here to do my job. If I do everything I'm supposed to do, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be here for life. Not realizing the business side of it. If I would have realized the business side of it, then I would have done it differently because back then that's when they were bringing the females in, the divas in, and anyone that had a female with them was getting a bigger push. If I would have
Yeah.
like opened my eyes and realized what was going on, I would have embraced her. I would have pulled her in. I would have used her more and just looked at her and went, "Oh, this is a business relationship. This is like my work partner. I need to use her to get to another level." But then when they put me with Glenn, I went back with Glenn. I went, "Okay, all is good in the world." And then they split us up and they put me with D'Lo, which
Yep.
was amazing. So I'm like, all right, great. I can go out and I can be Mosh still. I didn't realize I'm changing outfits, but right before I went through the curtain, um, we were working the Mean Street Posse in that first match on Sunday Night Heat where D'Lo and I were tagging together, and Mean Street Posse's on the way to the ring. Bruce Pritchard looks up at me in gorilla position. He goes, "Oh, you have to take out all of your earrings." And I was like, "Why do I have to take my earrings out?" He goes, "We want we don't want anything mosh out there. No headbanger out there. We want all Chaz. Go out there and be Chaz." I literally looked at him. I said, "Who the fuck is Chaz?" Like,
Mm.
still at that point, I had no idea who I was. So even when they put me with D'Lo, I went and I looked at D'Lo before we went out, and I go, it kind of blew my mind of what, because my idea was I was going to go out. I was Mosh. I'm going to be a headbanger. I'm going to go out. I'm going to do headbanger Mosh stuff. But D'Lo's got his character. I have my character, and somehow we'll mush them together and make it
Mm.
one and make it work. And that was the idea we had. I looked at him. I go, "What do we do?" D'Lo looks at me. He goes, "I don't know. We'll figure it out." And just as he said that, the music went, and through the curtain we went. So it was difficult all over again because again I had to figure out. And then what I found myself doing was trying to follow D'Lo's lead. I was kind of trying to piggyback off of what he was doing and trying to. So at one point I like started wiggling my head. I'm like, "That's his thing. That's not my thing." Like
Yeah.
it was when I had to be me. I had to be Chaz. It was very, very, very difficult. Um, and then they put turbans on our heads, and that just screwed everything up. That made it worse.
D- I guess you would have met D'Lo back in Smoky Mountain. Is that right? Was it around that time?
Nope.
No.
D'Lo actually came down to the Monster Factory. So
Right.
D'Lo, D'Lo and my so it's funny. So Glenn and my high schools wrestled one another. So Glenn and I knew of each other through high school wrestling because we
Right.
all our high schools were in the same district. D'Lo's high school, my high school wrestled his high school also. But
Okay.
we were all three were different weight classes. So I knew of D'Lo through high school wrestling because he was a heavyweight. I was like 150, but we knew each other. And then D'Lo and his friends used to rent the ring out from Larry on Saturday afternoons. D'Lo and his friends, D'Lo's like self-taught. He came down to the school and they would rent it out, and Glenn and I would watch. They had full production. They had lights, they had music, they had video cameras, they had ring entrances. They would like put on a whole production. They'd put on a whole show, and Glenn and I would watch. And then finally, one Saturday, Larry approached D'Lo and said, "Listen, you're really good. You got something. You should come down to the school." And D'Lo basically looked at him and goes, "Well, I'm kind of trained myself. I know what I'm doing. Like, what do I need you for?" And what he needed him for was some polishing stuff. So
Mm.
Glenn and I, more Glenn than me, worked with D'Lo with like polishing, like there's little details and things like that. And then from there, that's when D'Lo, went to Smoky Mountain, and then we caught back
Mm.
up to him, obviously, in Smoky Mountain, and then obviously in WWE. And it was actually D'Lo's first WWE show was that Saturday night, Shotgun Saturday night at the Mirage when we wrestled as the Flying Nuns. That was his first night in with the Nation of Domination.
So I guess at that time, you were Chaz, I guess, with D'Lo Brown. If you had been let through that curtain to be Mosh with D'Lo Brown and the lowdown team, how different do you think it would have played out?
I think for me mentally, it would have just been easier. Um, I think part of it, great. It's a great question. I've never been asked that question before.
Mm.
Um, I just think it would have been different because I would have known who I was. I think part of I thought D'Lo and I were great together. I thought we could have done
Mm.
great things because the great part about D'Lo and I, we were on the same page with everything. We worked out together. We traveled together. Everything was together, and all we kept talking about was how we can make things better. I just think as my character, I just would have known more what to do. I could have used different move sets because literally they wanted me not using any headbanger moves I had done. They didn't want me to do. So I had to try and
Mhm.
create all new moves and different things. And I just think it would have been better. And I think we could have gotten over maybe a little bit faster. I thought we were kind of getting over, and we were in a good spot for a little bit. And then when they brought Tiger Ali Singh in, and that kind of changed everything. But I
Mm.
just think I even thinking back now, going through like writing the book, and the writing the book was the greatest thing ever because it was very therapeutic, and I got to think about a lot of the stuff. Even when they said they killed Beaver Cleavage off, and they said, "Hey, you're going to go be Chaz," I probably at that point should have said, "Well, I don't know who Chaz is, and I realize what you're trying to do, but let me just go out and be Mosh." Like, there's,
Right.
Edge was Edge. You needed one name, and that was it. Like, I
Yeah.
could have went out and just been Mosh. So when even when instead of putting me with D'Lo, maybe I was doing quite a bit of single stuff at that point. Maybe just let me go as Mosh with the singles and kind of see where it went. But if I would have been even Mosh after Beaver Cleavage, I think it would have been better because again, I knew who I was. I had, Mariana with me. She still could have came with me, but she wore every outfit she wore was like all black. Like, so we could have created a whole little
Yeah.
thing of our own, either bringing Glenn back or not. Um, just looking back, hindsight's 2020, and but looking back and realizing what a business it was, if there's certain little things I would have tried to do, would it have made a difference? I don't know. In my mind, it would have, but who knows?
Um, you had a hiatus from the WWE for quite a while. I think it was over 10 years. And I know it was a match that you desperately wanted was to have at least one more match, Headbangers, back on WWE TV. And you managed to do that in 2016. What was that
Yes.
experience like? Because, again, this was for something different this time.
Yeah. So my son was born in 2004, and he had seen me do between when I left in '02. I did shows here and there. I did like spot towns here and there. Like I wasn't really involved. I did a convention here and there. Glenn and I really weren't speaking for a while. It was almost good 10 years. Like Glenn and I
Mm.
only spoke off and on. It was like a quick text here or there. It wasn't like we weren't as close as we were before. And so when Glenn finally moved to Florida, 10 years later, and we started doing more shows together, like my son had seen us do shows. He had seen many, probably hundreds of, indie shows that I had done. I mean, there was one point we were in the middle of a match and I looked over and my son was on our gimmick table laying down sound asleep. So my thing at that point was I just want one more time in that WWE ring, whether it's local. So every time they came into town, I would reach out to Hunter, I'd reach out to the office and go, "Hey, you guys are doing a house show or you have TV? Any chance of doing a dark match?" I said I would sign like a waiver, and but the answer was always no. And when I would run into Road Dogg doing shows, I'd always say to him, like, "Listen, your boys with Hunter still. Like, can you help me out? Just one match. That's all. Just one time in that ring. That's all I wanted." And it was him who called us to go back in 2016. And I wrote down at the end of my book, I wrote down like my top 10 matches or favorite things, and I listed them in chronological order. But my most favorite one ever probably is 2016. That's probably higher than WrestleMania 13. Our first WrestleMania and winning the tag belts. Because we were able to go back, was able to go back, be in that ring live on TV and have my son watch it. But what made it even there's two things that made it even more special was I'd said to him, I said, when I go to the ring, what would you like me to do for you? So that's no one else is going to know. You're the only one who's going to know this that to do it. And, I said, "You want me to do, I do the monkey face?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "You do the monkey face for Amy." Amy was my niece. And when she was a baby, I always did the monkey face. She laughed at it. So when I was on TV, I did the monkey face. When she watched, she knew that was for her. That's how that started. So he looked at me and he goes, "I want you to dab." And I said, "I'm not dabbing." I said, "I hate to dab. I think it's stupid. I'm not doing it." He goes, "That's exactly why I want you to do it because you hate it and you think it's stupid." So the greatest part about it is when we went back and I did my roll, I got up, went right to my corner. I didn't even tell the camera guys about this. They just put the camera right on me. And when I hit it, he freaked out. And
Yeah.
how I know he freaked out was my wife at the time. Uh, she actually set up her phone behind him so I could see his reaction as I'm coming out on TV. So I got to watch the entire match. By the time we got back to the hotel room, she texted it to me. And at that moment, I was like, we are thousands of miles away from one another. but still bonding over the
Yeah.
one thing that I wanted because I was able to watch him watch me live on TV, which was the greatest thing for me ever. That's one of the best things ever about my career is being able to go back and do that and actually watch him watch me. And when I hit that dab, he literally starts freaking out, and then he starts doing this, like wiping his eyes. And to this day, he'll deny he teared up, but the kid got teared up.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so 2016, it's one of the highlights for me of my career is being able to go back. And then, obviously we went back a couple more times after that, but that, you know, 2016 going back in Dallas, Texas is one of the greatest moments to me of my career is being able, again, watching him watch me was is just unbelievable.
I think that's a pretty good number one. I think that would take some beating. But lastly, before we let you go, you did bring it up a couple of times. The book that you're writing, all done. We're imminently waiting for it to be signed off, I believe, at this moment.
Yes.
Um, what was it like writing this book? Was there any like kind of memories or matches that kind of you bring up in the book that you'd forgotten about, and it was only through writing the book that they kind of came back to you? Is there any kind of moments like that?
Yeah, there's a couple. So the book is done.
Mm.
The book is with hopefully my it's with my what I'm hoping to be my publisher. I'm literally waiting any day to hear back from them about, moving forward. And so yeah, there was quite a few things that popped up. Um and it's funny because I kind of in my mind had things down, but then I used the great thing about the internet is able to go find some things and go, oh, I
Mm.
forgot we did this. Oh, I forgot we did that. Um, but the best part about the book it was so, and I didn't even realize I'd get this out of it. So therapeutic. There was a lot of things that I was able to talk about, and I don't want to give away too much of it.
Mm.
Um, but there's like things like the relationship between Glenn and I wasn't all rosy and fun, 'cause imagine being with someone, from basically from, we left in April of 94 and we were together almost every single night, every single day until he got hurt.
Yeah.
And was that like 98-ish? And we lived together, we traveled together. There's a lot of there was a lot of conflict in there. It wasn't all just, fun and games being on the road together. And that kind of comes out and writing it actually made me feel better about it.
Mm.
If that makes any sense at all, because sometimes I think about it and I say it and I'm like, how does that make sense? But it comes out like real life. And the great part about the book is like we wrestled LOD when they came back in the Manhattan Center. They were gone for 4 or 5 years. They came back. The story in the book is, Glenn and I were on the road. We were still part time. We were on the road doing singles matches, but we were winning every night for like, I think it was like a 7 or 8 day run. And then we show up to Manhattan Center feeling good about ourselves and going, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to be on Monday Night Raw in the Manhattan Center tonight. And we see the run sheet. It says Headbangers versus LOD. And we were like, we're about to get squashed.
Yeah.
But the cool part about the story, the perspective of the story is from my point of view to what I was going through then. Like I'm in the ring with LOD in the
Mm.
Manhattan Center. And at this point, there really wasn't the internet. So there really wasn't, leaks and things like that. So I'm standing in the ring at the Manhattan Center and that "Whoa," what a rush hits the Manhattan and the place erupts. And I'm standing, I got goosebumps right now. And I'm standing in the ring and I'm like, holy shit, like fan Chaz kicked in, like 15-year-old Chaz
Yeah.
kicked in, like,
Yeah.
holy cow, this is look at these guys, listen to the reaction. Like I wanted to cheer for them too. Um, all the way to the finish where it's a double count out. It's not they don't squash us. It's a 2 segment match, a double count out. No one wins. And then they roll me back in and they hit me with the finish and I flip all the way over and I'm laying in the middle of the ring and I'm laughing and smiling, going, I can't believe this is happening live on TV. I just got my ass whooped by the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. It was moments like that. There was a lot of moments like that that the book helped bring out. And not that I ever really fell out of love with the business. I maybe got bored with it because there was a long time I really didn't watch it, especially after I left. Um, but the book, and then I go up to the performance center in Orlando and I help out with the NXT guys. I do
Mm,
guest coaching up there. All of that between the book and that kind of made me fall in love with the business all over again.
mm.
And it gets me excited to talk about it. And it's given me an opportunity to do different things all over again.
Oh, Charles, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. There's so much we could talk for hours, I'm sure. But you have your own YouTube channel where you said you and Glenn obviously do these. Is it weekly podcasts that you do on there?
Yeah, so I do it. I actually do it with a friend of mine, Simon.
Simon,
Kind
yes.
of jumped in. Glenn kind of jumped in this week because Simon was sick, so Glenn jumped in for the last minute.
Mm,
Yeah, so I go live on my Chaz Chaz Mosh slash Chaz Warrington Facebook page. That's maxed out, so people are like, "Oh, you're not accepting my friend request." I'm like, "Well, just follow it because Facebook only allows 5,000." And I stream it through there, and I stream it through Instagram also, Chaz Mosh. And yeah, so it's live every Monday Eastern time at 6 o'clock. We try to go live and we just talk about everything and anything. And then you have chazmach.com where there's going to be updates on there and there's going to be merchandise and things are going to be done through there also. So that's kind of a thing in the works. And then, yeah, so I'm doing, podcasts like this through Podstars. You can book me on the website or Podstars also. And then I'm getting into doing a lot more public speaking. I do a lot in the community with kids. So
mm.
I do a lot of appearances with kids and talk to kids a lot. I love that. I love that, I'm able to give back and help out. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing and we'll see what happens. It's all good stuff. And signing the nostalgia slash legends contract with WWE has
Yes.
kind of kickstarted things again. And I'm just gonna enjoy the ride and see where it goes.
Oh, thank you so much again. Stay on the line. We'll do a proper goodbye in a moment as well as we wrap this podcast up today.
Awesome. Thank you. I
Guys,
appreciate it.
no problem at all. Guys, another amazing podcast on the channel. It's kind of weird for me, with some of these guests because, they were kind of these childhood heroes for me, especially the Headbangers, because, even things like, you'd see them come out on Monday Night Raw and they'd be wearing a new band t-shirt and you'd go check them out. If it was Marilyn Manson or something, me being an impressionable kid, I had to then go check out all these bands that they were wearing, even things like that. So this is a big one for me. So yeah, it was an unbelievable experience to have Charles on the channel today. Guys, as always, please leave a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel. We got loads more of these coming up. Very few special guests coming up in the next few weeks as well. We try and throw these podcasts out every Tuesday and Thursday. Always a brand new special guest. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Look after yourselves. Peace, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys.